Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. This podcast is of course free, but to ensure it continues, it does require your support. If you can support the show and its continued research, there are a number of tiers to choose from at patreon.com/the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast. We have a Discord private discussion group and a monthly live chat, plus regular personal updates behind the scenes. With your support, I hope to dedicate more time to this research and producing fortnightly episodes. Alternatively, you can really help support by subscribing, rating and sharing your favourite episodes with your friends. Thanks. Hello dear listener, how are you? I appreciate that the world is a rather strange place at the moment, and ironically you may have come here for some nice grounding explorations into the true meaning of life, so welcome. Thank you for being here and get yourself comfortable. A big hug through the ether to my dear curious crew on Patreon who support this project and help towards the costs of running it. I look forward to our Discord chat at the beginning of August, and there's a bonus episode relating to this show for patrons. I love working on this research, and I'm hoping to get to a point where I can work less of my day job so that I can have more space and time to write a book. So if you feel that you can support the project, please do. Thank you for the wonderful messages that keep coming. I've just returned from camping in Devon, and I'm enjoying conversing with you all about your thoughts on these informative shares. As always, please tweet me at _remain_curious and contact me at scarletofthefae.com, where you'll find my show notes and some other articles from time to time. This episode's share is from an Australian lady who recalls her first fairy encounter as a child. We began by discussing how people feel about sharing these encounters and how important it is for those to be received with respect, sensitivity and an open mind. We also discuss finding the courage to follow your true path and her healing process after a serious illness. My guest experienced deep trauma as a child. While we don't talk about this directly, it's made clear that she found herself in some dreadfully sad situations. Some of the content may upset people, so please be aware of background themes of drug abuse and child neglect that may trigger some people. As a listener of this podcast, she very much wanted to share her story with us here, and I'm very glad she did because it's a powerful, magical experience, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. I'll see you at the end for some discussion. Time to
been listening to your podcast for a while.
Oh, thank you.
And I've been a researcher as well, so I can feel the rhythm of what you're doing, and I feel like it's from a very good place.
Oh, I really do
true.
appreciate it.
Because, people, like I've heard many people say who've spoken to you, and I've read things as well where people feel quite vulnerable, especially a position in your community, or you've got a position in society as somebody who is supposed to pass a type of judgment on somebody else's well-being or mental health. People are calling what you're saying a type of mental ill health. It can feel like you could be discredited, but I've looked into it even more, and I just feel that there's no possible way that could happen. And in fact, it creates a questioning, and it creates a line of inquiry, which opens up more things, and people can see it however they like. It's just,
because you're a doctor of psychology.
Yes, so I'm a sociologist who has been practicing psychology for the last 8 years. And then I got cancer, and I went through all of my treatment, and really, I was very frightened, and asked lots and lots of questions. And I looked into different rituals people use to process fear of death. And I mean, I looked into psychedelics, and I didn't try them. I looked into them, and what people had gotten from those experiences. And I found a lot of comfort in those questions and answers, and what people had discovered, especially people with my, I suppose, my initial thought processes around those things, which was generally quite open, but as yet unexperienced. And then I looked at, a lot of comments that people have made throughout my life when I've worked with children and things like that. And I realized that probably what I really want to do is just work with children. And it's worked really beautifully for me. So now I'm a kinder teacher.
Oh, amazing.
And childcare worker as well. So that's
lovely.
That's actually, it is exactly what I want to do. So that's great.
Yeah, you took that step. You recognize, I think, it's so important to do that people just say, what do I really want to do? And not get tangled in, but I can't do that because I did, and if I do that, then blah, blah, blah. And just forget all that. Just forget all that. What is it that you would really want to do? And it's almost once you kind of turn that direction without knowing how to get there, just turn that direction, and it just kind of, things start to lay themselves out.
It really did. The bricks just laid themselves. I just had to walk. I started working with children, and it made me realize, like, there were some really dark times where I was panicking during my treatment. I'd come to cancer quite late in the game. I didn't realize I had had cancer until a year in. So by the time I was diagnosed, I was up to stage 3 cancer, which meant that, I bypassed a couple of immediate treatments that would have definitely ripped it right back. And so I was having these images and visions of swimming in dark water, but with a darker, larger shadow circling me. And I had to continually try to breathe through the fear of when it would strike. And it was a very frightening thing, feeling it and seeing it, and just having that sense of immediate and impending and painful death just right there. And also the terror of not being there with my children, So that was really frightening for me. And the peace that I felt was actually when I was with them. So not just with them, but just being around their energy was just very, very calming for me. And it was quite eye-opening how simple and gentle and kind that, they allowed that energy into my space. And I was quite locked into my fear. So they were able to unlock that without any force. It just swung open. And that's when I started to see that actually that's where I'm at my happiest, when I'm just with my children, and with children in general. They just make me feel happy. And apparently it's quite mutual.
The thing is with kids as well is that they're so present. Most times you'd say they're just so present and in the now, and it really teaches us something, doesn't it, about just
exactly
appreciating.
There is nothing else. There's nothing else. It's just now. And also that time doesn't run in a straight line. It just doesn't. And so the child in me was playing with the child that I was working with or hanging out with, and healing retrospectively, so it was just going back and healing without any intent on my part. It was just happening. So it's a very traumatized child, going from that to just seamlessly moving forward without even trying, by just saying yes to my heart and yes to what I needed to do. So I'm in remission, and I'm just happy to be in remission. But of course, you do have those fears floating. But it could happen anytime. And to just keep on top of that, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and going to work and embracing it.
I'm so glad
So
to hear that you're in remission. That is absolutely
yes.
wonderful news. And
thank you.
it sounds like it's been a really rich process for you, and something
amazing.
something that is so difficult that, you know, we would always worry about those kind of times in our life, and yet it sounds
definitely
like
yeah. I've had a few different experiences in my life which have been mainly my own, like sort of on my own, so without having someone else to sort of, I suppose, verify it. But the first experience that I had that I remember, which would sort of, I suppose, follow me throughout my whole life, was actually in the company of somebody else. So not long before I think I have something called, some people call it piking. And it's where you remember almost everything that happened to you, not in a photographic sense, but just in a linear sense. It's very easy for me to recall things that happened to me as an infant, and not just traumatic things, but just things. And we psychiatrists that I have been in treatment with as a child and older have come to see it as just, it's not very common, but it does happen to children who've been through very traumatic experiences, that their body and their mind just presses record. And yes, we do remember things in our bodies, but my mind remembers things like a movie, from a child's developmental perspective as well. So I remember many things from being probably just before my first birthday.
Gosh.
That was one thing. But just before my third birthday, I happened to be living with my mother in a commune in the north of New South Wales, in Australia, where it's basically a very feminist commune that they didn't allow any people or even animals, pets of a male gender, to live there.
Yeah.
It was a place where she could go that people who she owed money to didn't necessarily know where to go. So I would spend quite some time up there, but it was completely without any electricity, or it was a magical place, honestly. People said that they saw all kinds of things there. But I wasn't always with my mother there. I would go with some of the other women, and we'd go on little walks and things around the place. And I was walking down a slight hill. I was walking with this person, an older woman who was probably in her mid-20s.
And how old would you have been?
Just before my third birthday. So I was quite a little person. And I also remember very clearly that the tree was probably, like now when I look back at the tree, it was probably not a very tall tree. It was kind of a medium-sized tree, not one that would tower above you.
Yeah.
Kind of a cross between a bush or a shrub and a tree.
Yeah.
But as a little person, it was, a little bit bigger than me. And we could hear buzzing, like we thought that there were wasps in this tree, just sort of before us, going down the hill a little. And she put her arm out to sort of say stop, because, to protect me. And we both stopped on the rise, and we were looking down, and both of us trying hard to make out what this buzzing was making, the sound was coming from. And it seemed that they were, whatever it was quite large for a wasp, really. And they were moving differently than what I had seen. They were moving more, there wasn't like a swarming kind of flying pattern. It was more stopping and then moving and stopping and moving, almost like they were alighting onto a branch and then moving on.
Okay,
And then sort of just looking through them, really kind of almost like they were looking for something within the tree.
Yeah.
And once we sort of had this, I guess, some signal or something told us not to be afraid, because we were moving closer. And we started moving towards this tree, and we stopped probably about 1 meter to 1.5 meters away. And it was completely full of these small red beings. And I couldn't really focus on any one of them at once. Like, I was trying to look, as a little child, I was trying to take it all in at once, and I couldn't really focus. And one seemed to perhaps sense that, and moved towards my face, and it stopped and hovered in midair right in front of my nose. And it wasn't so that I couldn't see. I wasn't cross-eyed. It was like in perfect detail.
Yeah.
And I can see it right now as I'm closing my eyes. It was a female form with dragonfly type wings, 2 longer ones, and then just behind each one was smaller, like sort of flying wing.
Yeah.
Bit transparent with like kind of red shaded, like a red transparent. And the body was in almost like, you might understand what, if you think of ribbed tights.
Okay.
Like ribbed tights. It was almost like a whole body suit that went completely over. It was her entire skin was made of these tiny little ribs.
Wow.
And it was red, like red stocking tights, basically. And it was complete all the way down her back, her arms, her breasts. Like, it was in a suit. There were no nipples. It wasn't anything like that. It was like a suit, like a skin that covered her body, with these little ribs. And her feet did not have toes. They were like little stocking feet. So it was like a suit in a way.
Yeah.
But her whole face was in that same but it was more on her face. It was a little bit more, I suppose, more sort of flatter. It wasn't quite so raised.
Yeah, the rib.
And in that, yes, in that sense, I could pick out her features beautifully. Her hair was long and the same shade of red, exactly the same, as her skin. Even her little eyes had whites in them, long red eyelashes, but her pupils were a dark red brown. Her pupils, sorry, the iris, I beg your pardon. The pupils were black. Her nose was very small and very fairy-like, slightly upturned. Her mouth had lips. She had a little chin. She had a very perfect sort of ratio of features.
Yeah.
She was a very beautiful little thing. No pointed ears. She just had normal shaped ears. And she just looked so elegant and so beautiful. And she wasn't smiling or frowning. She just looked impassive. And she was just hovering there right in front of me. And I didn't have a sense to reach out or do anything like that. Even as a little child at that age, I would love to have probably grabbed it or touched her, or I would have picked up anything shiny, I think, at that age. But I didn't. I just stood there and observed her, and she observed me. It seemed that perhaps we were there for maybe 10 seconds at the very most. It did seem like a lot longer, but now that I've thought about it, it wouldn't have been that long at all, really. But everything behind her was moving and stopping and moving and stopping. And now that I've had a chance to look back at it again and again, of course, I look back at it often and I can see it again as if it was right in front of me. Now that I've thought about it, the patterns that were being made behind her in the tree by the other beings were almost geometric. And almost, I think, synchronized, almost like a kaleidoscope would be.
Yes.
If you were to turn it, it's sort of, as a child walking and stopping above the hill, it looks like they were stopping and starting and looking sort of haphazardly stopping. But as I look at it now, I can actually see that it is tumbling and stopping and turning and moving in a very organized pattern and actually a beautiful dance. It's almost geometrically like a kaleidoscope, just those little windows of shape just opening up and closing as they went through the bush, which is just trippy as.
That's really amazing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
How big do you think she was? So she came down to your little face, then
my tiny face. Yep. So she was just smaller than the width of my face, and I was little, so I would say an inch.
Wow.
Maybe an inch and a half.
So an inch and a half tall.
Long. So she was flying, and she was laying she was like in flight.
Yes.
And hovering. So,
yes.
And in fact, they all were.
Yeah.
Some of them were even going backwards just a touch to go down, depending on the branch. But they seemed to know completely where they were within the tree. So no bumps or like sort of spatial miscalculations.
Awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, total awareness of where, and as if that was a very familiar patch and a familiar movement that they did there. Don't know what they were getting.
And you seem to have a sense. Did you say that she was shining in some way? Did you have that?
She was glowing. Yes. So she had this inner. It's hard to really describe that. That's the bit that always gets me, because the outline of her was so crisp, in my mind, but the tree was glowing with their redness, with their sort of. It was almost like a phosphorescence, like a.
I know, yeah.
It seemed to leave what I think now perhaps were little trails, which were actually lighting up wherever they had been or were about to go, because time again was moving strangely. And I think it's been said about that particular place that it just does. Things are a bit slower there. Or faster. It's hard to tell, but time is not quite the same. It always feels just a little different.
It's like a step out of time in some way.
Just that little tiny, just enough to make it slightly known. But the lady that was with me was completely silent, and was actually in withdrawals from, I think, possibly heroin. So I know that she was unwell. I knew that she was having headaches and was unwell, because she wanted to walk, and I wanted to go for a walk. So we decided to go together. It's a place that was considered quite healing. There were quite a few naturopaths and herbalists there that helped my mother in particular try and ease her own problems. So they were using, angelica and hibiscus and things that they had brought with them. As well as massive paddocks full of lavender and things like that. So they did have a lot of herbs and things that I'm guessing now as an older woman, they probably did go there to find healing.
Yeah.
But as a little person, I just knew that she wasn't well, and that I overheard a lot of discussions about different things that people were trying to sort of get off of and things. So I know that she wasn't totally well, and that we wouldn't have been there for that long because she needed to keep moving.
What was her reaction? Did she?
She was breathing. I could actually hear her breathing next to me while this being stopped in front of my face, because I know that at first her feeling was, I need to protect her from what possibly is stinging insects.
Yeah.
And then as we both realized and moved towards the beings that were there, I feel like she was just basically trying not to make anything happen to shoo them off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Scare them away. Because I actually didn't, until I became aware as it started to sort of move on from us. I was in my own little zone there, and I started to realize that she had been making this deep breathing sound the whole time beside me, and that actually it was only when she spoke that I realized that she had seen it as well. I thought perhaps that I was just having a little daydream.
So she was locked into this experience and experiencing on a deep level as well.
Deep level, yeah. What ended up happening was she she kind of, this little being was moving her wings very quickly and then stopping them. And when she stopped them, I could see them perfectly, but then I only knew she started moving them again when I couldn't focus on them. And that happened a lot, even over that 10 seconds. She sort of stopped and buzzed, and I didn't really hear like an individual buzzing from her. It was just a general buzzing. But the visual of that stopping and starting was fascinating. And eventually what happened was she made almost a cicada sound, which is like a high, almost piping sort of little crickety sound. It's hard to describe. And it was almost like a call, like a signal, I guess, because she never blinked, but she had eyelashes, and she just held my gaze like the whole time.
Yeah.
But her wings actually clicked together, and then they all just flew away.
All of them?
All of them within, like, I reckon half a second, and they had moved on, and they went forward, and that was it. That they sort of just disappeared. And then I just stood there looking after them, like looking at where they'd gone, trying to process, I guess, what I had seen, and thinking, well, that was a really good one, that one, you know.
Yeah.
And so this lady said to me, did you just see that as well? I guess
lovely.
That was all she could say was, did you just see that as well? Because obviously I was standing still looking, you know, in one spot for a long time.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I did. I remember my little voice echoed down the hill a little, and she said, wow.
Oh, that's so amazing. That's so lovely. Healing has helped me many times in my life when I'd reached a point where something needed to change. In 2005, I trained with Martin Brofman to learn the body mirror system of healing, which was life-changing for me. It's based on the idea that the parts of your body that don't work well reflect the parts of your life that don't work well, and about which you have tension in your consciousness. The understanding is that tension is stress, and stress causes symptoms. In a distance healing or in-person session, I move up the chakras, returning each one to wholeness using a colour map. During the process, I see images and situations, I hear words or receive impressions that tell me something about what caused the tension in that person's life. The feedback at the end of the session is a really big part of the healing. If you're interested in a chakra healing session, you can contact me at scarletofthefae@gmail.com.
Yeah, and then she said, are you sure? Did you see the little red fairies? And I said, yeah, I saw them. And I described basically as best as I could, like pretty red fairies with big dragonfly wings, and they were wearing tights. And she's nodding, saying, yeah, I saw that as well.
Wow. So she didn't get one coming to her? She didn't have one sort of standing?
No,
No.
not at all. It didn't go anywhere really that close to her. She was probably not that close to me either. She was probably about a meter away.
Okay.
Because I was always like walking zigzags. I used to get told off for it all the time as a small child. So she's probably walking quite a distance, like probably enough away that if I decided to do my funny little zigzag float around, that I didn't trip her over.
Yeah.
So yeah, she'd given me enough space, and had probably maintained distance. And yeah, it just happened, and it was quite incredible because, of course, like with the piking, with that memory thing, I can just access it anytime, and it does feel like a gift sometimes. And just to have her see, because now that woman, we've lost touch 20 years ago now, 40 now. Over time, she actually got very cleaned up and moved far away from us, and found me over Facebook, just as I was.
Wonderful.
She's started talking to me about things But I did lose touch with her for many years, especially after I'd gone into foster care and, moved all over. And she actually, humorously and sadly in a way, she had become a born again Christian.
Okay.
And not sadly, I guess sadly, that she felt that she never discounted that she saw them, but she had turned them into demons.
Oh.
And a temptation, for her to believe in not God, in the other. And I thought that was sad, but also fascinating, because she still didn't say, oh no, it was just her hallucination caused by this or that. She just maintains that happened, and tried to say, I feel that it was a message from,
Wow.
devil and things like that. And so in my own way, I feel like that still validates.
Well, I guess that was the only. I guess that was the only way that, say, sort of mainstream culture would allow her to make sense of it in any way, because either the answer is that she made it up, and of course she can't go for that option because you also saw it.
Because I was there.
The only other accepted explanation, say within a belief system that is also mainstream, is then to say, well, they were demons, and
yes,
repent.
and they certainly exist. Of course they do. So it just I found that very interesting, especially from a psychologist's point of view. Absolutely. But I think that for myself, it's always been something that I haven't met anyone else who's seen, or like for real, until I had spoken, I suppose, maybe to you, and also just heard the stories, which have always just riveted me, because you're looking and you're searching and you're feeling and trying to see, was that like this? Was it like this? Was that the same? And there have been a few that you've described how my gut has said, yes, definitely they saw that. And whoever has seen whatever they've seen, believe that. There's been quite an impact on me as far as what I teach my children. I allow them all their fairy tales, and I allow them to have gnomes in the garden, and I teach them all of the folklore and that I can find, and books do find their way to me. And I teach them as much as I possibly can, and I love doing that. So yeah, that's cool. But I guess as a little person, it didn't harm me at all to know that she was there, or that they were there. It was a wonderful thing, and it made me, even though many terrible things happened to me, they never harmed me, and I felt like that was one of the things that couldn't be taken from me. So it was quite sweet. But that was amazing.
It sounds like a very healing experience. What kind of sense did you get from her? Also, do you think they were all female?
Yes, I did feel that they were. I felt like I did. I can't say that I saw exact details of the others, only that I did feel that was the case. And I've never had anything to change my mind or to recollect it. The only thing that has changed or become more clear into focus was the larger patterning of their movements. The one thing I did pick up was, and then at the time and also now very strongly, is that she was the leader, or that she, and that it wasn't a hive mind. It wasn't that. They were all individual, deciding and choosing to do what they were doing, to move with her, follow her, and that they were very old. She was very, very old. I felt that she was so wise, and she also had an authority about her. She was, it was almost like, I don't know, it's hard to describe. Not that she was like, she wasn't military, but she had a very authoritative air. Like they had very important business to do, and they were doing it. And that something was important, that she would stop and show me herself, because it did seem like they had something very intricate happening, and that it was totally alien to whatever was happening for me and humans. She had, like I said, she had a very sort of unreadable expression. She didn't have like a smile or a frown. She was just observing and not assessing, even just looking. It didn't feel like she knew me. It just felt that my awareness was open enough for her to, she must have noticed that it was open and that she chose to see me and for me to see her. So
yeah,
I felt that it was completely at her decision, like it was her will for me to see her. It wasn't that I had just spied her.
no, I understand that. Yeah, I do understand that. Did you get a sense of any message from her or any emotion? And although she wasn't sharing emotion, her
Yes,
emotion,
actually,
did you get an
yes.
emotion?
So a few years ago, I was going through some sad things, and I was trying to figure out a way to perhaps be less sensitive to other people's really hard times. I'm an empath, and I find it very difficult not to absorb things that in a healthy way. I think that's the hard part. And it actually, I had a memory pop into my head of her being incredibly strong and incredibly old, but also so vital and so she was old to me. She was old to others of her kind. And she was iron strong. Like there was just nothing about her that was there was no surplus fat on her. And it wasn't just like, it was in her being. She was just completely, everything about her was necessary. And it made me feel a sense of comfort in time passing for me, and that as time passed, I would become stronger and things would be burned away that they're not necessary for me. And that and the truth is it has happened, and I have become stronger and I have become less vulnerable to others without becoming insensitive. So
Yes.
those wisdoms have come to me, and because of course there were times where I was like, oh my gosh, I can't bear to feel anymore. But I did have that picture of her just almost a warrior standing or flying in front of me. Like, we each have our own purposes, and we find the strength to fulfill them. And whatever her purpose was known only to, I guess, her own dimension. And mine is known to mine. And even though right then I was at the very beginning of what I thought was my journey, well, I guess that perhaps she could see that time wasn't linear, and that inside me was the woman that I've become.
Yes.
And that perhaps she saw all the things. And who knows, maybe she saw none of that and she was just an elemental being with none of those feelings, but that's what I got.
Yeah.
Because I thought that too. Maybe I just projected all of those things onto her. But it did feel that she knew things. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like she connected with you at some deep level. Yeah.
Yes. Oh. Yeah. Like a very strong connection there.
That's really
and yet none. So yeah, it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I think that's never left me. It was something really delicate and special, and also just so wise. Her hair was beautiful too. It was in my hair now, I have quite a few strands of silver, and I love it. And I remember as a little person, she had what I thought would be like metallic strands of red in her hair amongst just the, I suppose, non-metallic red.
Okay.
Now looking back, I think that perhaps that's why I thought she was old.
Right.
Because she had kind of streaks of silvery red in her hair.
Wow.
And I thought of it as like, I must have thought of it as old then. I don't know why. It just came to me that she was just so ancient. But it was really beautiful. Like, it was stunning. And as I've gotten older and, have learned the terrible loss of losing your hair and what you think of as your femininity and all the things through chemotherapy, and then regrowing my hair and finding all this silver.
Yes.
I have such an appreciation and love for it.
Yes, I can resonate with that. My hair is entirely silver now.
Oh, so wonderful.
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, the jealousy.
But yes, there are kind of feelings around that as well when you're kind of transitioning from a young woman with this kind of really vibrant hair, and then the greys or the whites start to appear, and what society says about that, and having to dye it.
And it's such a poisonous thing, because actually there's nothing more powerful, I think, than a woman that has enjoyed her years, or even just got to those years where she feels okay to let them out. And in fact, a lot of younger women have silver hair, but they don't feel safe to let them out.
It's true.
And we're all capping our, they say, I think in the Bible it even says, do not hide your light under a bowl. And it's the same thing about hair. I think it is a crowning thing. It's something so viscerally attached to your yourself.
It's very liberating, isn't it? Just to kind of, this is me, and
and this is me, and that's okay, and I love that, and it's fine.
Do you think you have an idea of what the shrub might have been? Was there fruit on the tree, or
no? It was. Do you know what? It had no leaves.
Right.
It was what I've looked it up in many, many books, because I've tried to find it. And the only thing I can think of is that it was a birch tree, perhaps.
Okay.
That had, but see, it was high summer, and it should have had all of its leaves. And it didn't have any leaves at all.
So I wonder if they were helping the tree in some way. I'm just looking in my tree wisdom book here. It says Tree Wisdom, the definitive guidebook. It's by Jacqueline Memory Patterson.
Oh.
Birch. I've got silver birch, 91.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was something like that. And there was something very twisted about it, though. It wasn't a straight up and down silver birch that I've seen. It was old, like really old, and perhaps maybe stunted at some point, but it didn't look dead. It just looked like the leaves were sleeping.
It says the silver birch is known as the Lady of the Woods. It is womanly, constant, and friendly, a tree of enchantment. When seen by moonlight, it presents its most outstanding feature, a gleaming silvery bark which legends throughout Europe describe as the hallmark of fairy.
Sorry.
This white bark also gleams attractively in the sun and shows the lightness of the tree's spirit, the ethereal beauty of the innocent, dancing quality of the female in nature, with delicate branches and leaves to match.
Right, so that was the reason why I'm thinking that it was a birch, and after all the looking, I keep coming back to this same, the very delicate branches, and the gleaming bark. It was like almost, like silver. Yeah, it was very light, especially in the sunlight. Yeah, it was beautiful.
And various origins of the word beech, beef, or Beth, variations of the Gaelic name for birch, are given as meaning existence, enduring, world, and shining one. Yeah.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Wonder if it,
Yes. It's a
Yeah.
very old place up in those areas. It's now been claimed by the government, I hear, as a national park. So none of the dwellings that were there or the women that lived there are there any longer. But there was a period of time where it was quite famous for the women that were there. And there's not much to be found except a few pieces here and there that were written about it.
Were you able ever to return to that place?
Yes, that was my last time there. I had been there off and on over the years, like sort of up until that point. Like as a baby, I think my mum would often go there, like when I was a baby. I think just, it might have even been just on her way. And I would spend a little bit of time there, and I remember it well, very well. But that time that I saw the beings was the last time that I had been there. So I haven't been back.
What happened that day when you went back to the house? Did you tell them what happened? Or?
No, I didn't tell them what we'd seen, but I heard the woman telling the others later. And they all started talking about, different things that they'd seen there. So that's how I sort of knew that maybe there were other things that people had seen there.
At this point, we did begin to discuss 2 other encounters, one of which is available on patreon.com/the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast.
Loved talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're in a much better place now, and
yes, I certainly am.
That life brings you joy, and that you feel safe.
Yeah, and I do.
Well.
I think creating that safety in my life for my children vicariously makes me feel safe as well. Being a protector makes me feel protected. Yeah. So that's another way that happens for me as well. So
yeah, that is true. Oh.
And who knows what experiences will happen in the future. I'd love to see a gnome or 2 popping around the garden. I've got lots of little gnomes everywhere and lots of gnome energy, so who knows. I loved listening to your stories about the gnomes. That was amazing. On your podcast, people seeing things, and it was just lovely. Some of them a bit scary, but also just interesting, fascinating stuff. Yeah,
it is. I find it absolutely fascinating. I really, really love hearing about all these experiences. I feel the same as you. If you've seen something similar yourself, you go, oh yeah, I know how that felt for that person. I know what that was like.
And also the seeking of it too. There's the seeking, I love also, like, if on the Facebook page somebody might post something, but also some of the richest parts are the comments. You'll read down, you go, oh wow, someone's just shared something really amazing, and that's just totally struck a chord. Love it.
That's true. Oh, well, thank you for being part of this and sharing your story, because people listen to that and they are then feeling, oh yeah, okay, I know this other person has felt this too, and I'm not alone, and that's just so important. So
I
thank
agree.
you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this enchanting share. Small winged fairies are reported much less frequently, but they are witnessed from time to time, and they featured in Episode 3, The Honey Bandit, and Episode 8, The Good, the Bad and the Tickly. If anyone has any ideas about the ribbed nature of the female form, please get in touch. Our understanding of these experiences are so limited. As we're well aware, the most common way to make sense of them is to point towards psychological symptoms, particularly in a situation where someone's experienced trauma. I personally feel that this is a closed-minded and outdated approach which fails to take into account the plethora of other similar encounters that people have had without symptoms of trauma. In addition, this was witnessed by two people who remained committed to the fact that the event took place as described, although, as we heard, the older woman could only make sense of what she witnessed by deciding to view it through the lens of her religious belief system. Religious belief is often the only acceptable route of understanding for those with a limited Western world view that is unable to fully explain these phenomena. It was at the time of the Enlightenment in the 17th century that we first began to look to science as a means of understanding the world, through investigation of that which we could weigh and measure. Before this time, the world view was provided by the Church. Extraordinary phenomena, which at the time was often tied in with religious experience, were not able to be explained by means of quantifying, and as a result, religion and reason formed into two separate domains, as it were. Anything spiritual or extraordinary was permitted to sit outside the philosophy of reason, as it couldn't be measured. Our current Western society still views the world from this reasoned perspective, although I believe that we are in the midst of evolving into a new age where we are beginning to consider the universe from an even more enlightened perspective. Our guest gave a really full, reflective and meaningful explanation of her encounter, and the subsequent encounter which is shared on Patreon. I applaud her for doing so. She has allowed herself to decide what it meant for her, because she knows, as we should all know, that we all have the answers within us. As a society, we're not used to trusting our perception about anything. At school, we're conditioned in a certain way which shapes our prevailing views. Rather than empowering our children to trust their own sense about things, we're always correcting them, to view experiences according to what's acceptable by society, to go along with the permitted worldview. What if you decided that all the answers are within you? I realise that's a fairly radical idea for some to grasp, but if it were true, what would your life look like? What would be different? Yes, everything is, of course, measured. We live alongside each other, and there's a gentle dance involved when finding what works for you and those around you in your life. But you do retain the power to decide what is right for you, so don't be afraid to explore that perspective. A huge thank you to my guest for entrusting her encounter to us with such an open heart. I've included some fairies with wings examples in the show notes which are very interesting, and please do get in touch with your own encounters or thoughts about the show. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate and share it with one other friend that you think might like it. This really helps and I do appreciate it. Keep walking in nature, keep being you, and always remain curious.